What are realistic expectations for Oklahoma going into 2025? Well, this is a double-edged question because there's going to be the Oklahoma fans that have their expectations, and then there's going to be my expectations. So, Brad Venables in 3 years, 6-7, 10-3 with a signature win over Texas in the Red River Shootout, 6-7. Now, the offense was sporadic last year. It was banged up. Brand new offensive line for Bill Beatonbow to work with. Weapons were dropping left and right. You benched your quarterback in week 4. You fired your offensive coordinator. You had 2 new guys running the show. You still made it to a bowl game after turning back to Jackson Arnold. And honestly, if a few things went differently, we're talking about, I think, Oklahoma in a completely different light. If a few things are different on the offense against Missouri, you probably win that game and you finish the year off 7-5. If things go your way a little bit differently against Navy, where you have better wide receiver play, where Michael Hawkins isn't running for his life the entire time, and you don't get that 2-point and you get that 2-point conversion, well, now we're talking about an 8-5 team. So the offense last year was terrible. They were one of the worst in college football, 97th in total points, 113th in total yards, 118th in passing yards, 67th in rushing yards, 130th in explosive plays, and they gave up the most sacks in college football. So this offseason, Brent Venables said, all right, let's get to work. And he goes into the transfer portal and he finds himself a quarterback in John Mateer. And he finds himself a brand new offense coordinator in Ben Arbuckle. And Arbuckle comes from the spread offense, comes from the air raid, but it is a little different. They like to run the football. They like to utilize the quarterback as a runner. And the best part is that John Mateer, who was one of the more sought-after quarterbacks, Miami wanted him, North Carolina wanted him, Oklahoma gets him, already has a relationship. I don't care what anybody says. If you have 44 touchdowns last year and over 4,000 total yards of scrimmage, you're a good quarterback. I don't know if that's going to translate to the SEC with the same amount of metrics, but I do believe that you are a good quarterback. And I believe that John Mateer is a top 10 quarterback going into this year. I would have him as QB4 in the SEC going in right now, simply based off of his stats. But the question is, what are realistic expectations? What are your goals going into the year if you're Oklahoma? And be real, because everyone knows what the goals should be for Oklahoma. It's a blue blood program. It is a dominant program. They have respect. They have morale. And more importantly, they have resources that should never allow them to sit below the paddy wagon of an underwhelming team. But you look at your schedule and you look at what you didn't bring into the transfer portal. What are your realistic goals? When you have games on the road next year against Tennessee, against Alabama, against South Carolina, what are your goals next season? 9-3, 10-2, 8-4. For me personally, I think 8-4 is a solid year. I think 8-4, year one, new offense, that's a unit that ends up finishing top 50 in almost every single category. Top 50 in passing, top 50 in rushing. You're not allowing too many sacks. You're seeing the growth of the offensive line take that next step forward. You're able to have a stable RB1. You have a quality here from Deion Burks fully healthy. I think that 8-4 is a very solid season. You get 2 ranked wins, and you find yourself in the conversation playing meaningful football going into the month of November. Those are my expectations for Oklahoma. You beat Texas, you beat South Carolina, you beat Tennessee. And then you lose, and then maybe you beat Michigan. And you lose every other game, along with, beating Temple and Illinois State. I think it's a good year. But I also know my expectations are a little bit different than what are those out in Norman. Because if those in Norman are prideful, they believe that they should never be sitting below a 10-win marker. Even though they are going to lose some players, even though they are going to lose some coaches, there are some people out in Norman that do believe that they are good enough to be a team that should be competing for national championships every single year. And I agree with you. Because if I know what the expectation is in Oklahoma, I know what that crimson and cream logo means. I understand what winning the Red River Shootout's all about and setting a standard out in your country, out in your land. You don't want to be a team that ends up finishing bottom half when it comes to your recruiting. You don't want to be able to see your team finish right alongside Oklahoma State. You want to be a team that trends upward every single year. And so what is 2023? That's going to be the big question. There's 3 goals that I think I have for Oklahoma going into next season. Goal number 1, do you have the right coach? Was 2023 just a fluke year for Brent Venables, where they get a win over Texas in the Red River Shootout, but then they lose to Kansas and they lose to Arizona, and they ended up having a really good quarterback with Dylan Gabriel that they let walk over to Oregon. Was it a fluke, or was it actually just the standard moving forward? Last year in the SEC, bad offensive line, bad quarterback play, inconsistent wide receivers. But now you're back to that 8-4, 9-3 season. And you got the right coach. And I believe Brent Venables, from a defensive standpoint, few are as good as him in the sport. Few. There are probably a handful of names that if you were to pick a defensive coordinator, whether as head coach or as a simple play caller, you would pick over Brent Venables. But is he more than just a defensive play caller? Is he a full masterclass? Is he a full identity when it comes to being able to lead a program? Because some people are able to lead one side of the football. Other people are able to lead a program. Do you have that out in Norman? Question number 2. Do you have a quarterback that can resonate with the culture? Because when I look at Norman and when I look at Oklahoma and when I look at Memorial Stadium, the teams that were always the most feared in the Big 12 were the ones that had stable quarterback play. Baker Mayfield put on a show every single Saturday. Didn't matter who he was going against. Iowa State, Kansas State, Texas. He was going to make sure that everybody knew who he was. And he carried himself with that swagger and that poise and that pedigree that was certainly, I'm QB1 in college football. Don't mess with me. John Mateer's got that moxie. John Mateer's got that spunk. He's got that attitude of where I believe that I am the best quarterback. I don't care that I come from the G5 level or that I played in what was the Pac-12 that was really a Pac-2. I don't care that I played against a Mountain West team. I'm good enough. Do you still carry that momentum and that mantra with a new offensive coordinator and Ben Arbuckle down in Norman? And then eventually the team starts playing with that image because of when you have a quarterback like John Mateer that already has a good relationship with Ben Arbuckle, he's kind of like that secondary teacher on the field. He's telling where the wide receivers need to turn. He's telling where the running back needs to cut. He's making sure the offensive line is lined up properly, and he's going ahead and calling the audibles. You got to make sure that you have that because the best teams in Oklahoma over the last decade, Baker Mayfield, Kyler Murray, Caleb Williams for a hot minute when you had him, Dylan Gabriel, all those teams, quarterback that was able to define who you were, define your roster. And question number 3 that I have, can you still be sustainable in a brand new conference? Because if everyone's talking about Texas right now, and while they should, Texas has been a team that the last 2 years has gone to the college football playoff and exceeded expectations. But a lot of people forget about Oklahoma running the Big 12. Before Steve Sarkisian came to town, it was Oklahoma's conference to lose. Every single year they were playing in Arlington. They were the team that was definitely punching its ticket to the college football playoff. In a 4-team playoff format, Texas barely was even in the conversation. Meanwhile, you're looking at Oklahoma, 11-1, 10-2. 11-1, 12-0, punching their ticket to Arlington, getting a win over Iowa State or Kansas State, Texas. Didn't matter. They were going to the playoff every single year. Do you still have that same capabilities? Are you still recruiting at the same level? Are you still bringing in the right type of names? Are people still looking at Oklahoma as a feared program? Because I can tell you what, they're not going to sit by idly and wait for them to turn into a feared program. They are going to be a team that people want to buy into. And I believe Oklahoma should be. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just beginning on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because FanDuel is your home for NBA live betting. Even if you miss the first few minutes of a game or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can make your picks from the first whistle until the final buzzer. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. However you want to play, now is the perfect time to join. New FanDuel customers get started with $150 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet win. Just visit FanDuel.com/SECU to join today. That's FanDuel.com/SECU for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Disclaimer: must be 21 plus and present in select states. For Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino and 18 plus in DC. First online real money wagers only. $5 first deposit is required. A bonus issues with non-withdrawable bonus bets, which expire 7 days after retreat. Restrictions apply. See terms at sportsbook.fanduel.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit fanduel.com/RG. Call 1-888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org/chat in Connecticut or visit mdgamblinghelp.org in Maryland. Hope is here. Visit gamblinghelplinema.org or call 800-327-5050 for 24/7 support in Massachusetts, or call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY in New York. All right, back to the show. When you are as pedigree as a program as Oklahoma is, you better be punching out the right amount of talent. There are first-round talents galore coming out every single year. Oklahoma should be at that standard. Do you have that? Do you have the same amount of recruits? Do you have the same type of personnel? Do you have the same type of attitude? Because if you do, games against South Carolina, even though South Carolina, I think is going to be a good team in 2025, should be at worst 50-50. Games against Tennessee, you should be able to march into Neyland Stadium and have a victory. You should be able to feel really good about how you're playing against Texas. You should be feeling really good about where your offensive line is, where your defensive line is, what type of personnel that you're pushing out, because if you have the type of positions. When I look at Oklahoma, you should be in that conversation every single year. Every single year. That's just my opinion. If your offensive line steps on up, if your defensive line steps on up, if you have a good number 2 receiver opposite of Deion Burks, you should be a team that is signaling itself for an 8-win season. But I believe 8 wins is good enough for Brent Venables in year 4. What do Oklahoma fans feel? Is it good enough? Is it good enough if you're saying, I don't know, top 25 in scoring, top 20 in passing? What's good enough for you when it comes to guaranteeing Brent Venables gets a 5th season? What if it's a lot like Florida, where Florida last year, you get the buy-in from the culture, the team starts off really sluggish, it feels like Billy Napier is going to be shown the door, and then eventually everyone starts to see the wins, you get a couple of upsets down the stretch, you finish 8-5, and now you're bringing in the right recruits, and now you feel really good about your quarterback coming back for another year. Is that good enough for you? Because for me personally, if you get to 7-5 with a bowl victory, I think that's a good spot. I think 8-4 is over exceeding expectations with your schedule. But I also know that Oklahoma fans, you're completely different than me. You feel a little bit differently about where your team should be every single year, at least going into 2025 and beyond.